Happy Easter, everybody. Good morning, and welcome to the Sunday Chit Chat. I hope everybody's doing well. Today, we have something a little bit special for you, but I'm going to lay some ground rules down about the topic today. Number one, Happy Easter. Today is the day that we celebrate the risen Lord. You'll hear this throughout the Christian community as he is risen. And while this is a massive Christian holiday, whether or not you believe in Christ, whether or not you do that, is irrelevant in this discussion today. Okay, I'm going to be talking about this. I am going to demand respect of this. If you don't want to be here, don't be here. Period. End of story. We're going to be talking about coins of the Bible during Jesus's time frame. Some of them are beforehand, talking about various parables and things of that nature. I've done a lot of work with this. Hey, good morning, Mike and Jack. Mike, you might cringe a little bit when I look at this. The information that I have is the best that I could do in this short time. Yesterday, I was just like, what am I going to do for tomorrow's presentation? And so some of the coins might be wrong. Do me a favor. If you find that one of the coins is wrong, feel free to let me know. But what I want people to understand is today you're in my house. I'm going to require respect. Okay. If you don't want to be here and you don't like the conversation, leave. Period. End of story. This is one of the few times, just like I do on Independence Day. If you're going to badmouth America on Independence Day, you're out of my stream. Period. End of story. There's no second guessing. I don't care if you're a friend of mine. Sarcastic, smartass remarks here today are not going to be warranted. Okay, because today is a religious holiday for millions of people. And whether or not you like it or not, it's a fact. We're going to be talking history. We're going to be talking coins. We're going to be talking some important stuff. But I am going to demand respect today, just out of respect of it being a religious holiday. Just like I would do if you're Muslim and you were in Ramadan, or if we were talking about the celestial alignment of whatever that is, I would require respect for that as well. I just want to lay that groundwork. There's not going to be any cushion. If I see it, I'm going to remove it. Period. End of story. My moderators will not move anybody. It will be me. If you have any question or problem with that, you will come to me. I will deal with this directly. Okay? If you want to get back onto this channel after being removed today, you and I are going to have a discussion about respect. So let's lay that ground rule. Let's lay that down hard and fast. Okay? I am not going to be talking a lot of religion today, but I am going to be utilizing historical and biblical references to talk about a specific coin. So, if you want to be here, I'm more than happy to have you join in the conversation. I'm going to be showing some different coins. I'm going to be talking about some of the research that I've done. There's a fascinating world in ancients. Now, I'm going to be very clear. I am not an ancient coin person. I love them. They're amazing. But I know next to a gnat's ass, about the size of a hair on a gnat's ass, about ancient coins. I'm just not the person to do that. We do have one person in here who is very good at that. So if you identify anything at all that's wrong, please do me a favor, gently correct me, point me in, let's have the discussion. I recommend that you all are in the right chat. No. But again, today is going to be about respect. And I really, 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 seriously, folks, okay, I allow open conversation in my chat. When we talk politics, we talk stuff like that. Today is a religious holiday. We're going to keep it. We're going to honor it. If you don't want to do it, please just leave. Don't be a smartass. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you some coins. And these coins, they're not the best examples. And this is where there might be something a little bit different. I may have the very specific year off. I may be off one or two versions of the coin. This is to give you a general idea. I will work with people to get the coins updated. If we have to do that, I'll put out some information, an updated sheet or something like that, posted in the community page. So if we do find errors on the coins themselves, that's fine. The information should be great. I've taken a lot of time. I stayed up way too late last night researching this. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. So I'm going to pull this up. And the first coin that I'm going to be talking about is this one. Now, what is this coin? Well, if you talk about the ancient world, this is probably one of the most known, most kind of revered when you talk about the Roman history, when you talk about that, the foundation of weights and measures, that kind of stuff. This is the denarius. Now, this is a Roman silver coin. Now, this is mentioned very often in the New Testament. In particular, Matthew 22, 19, 21. Now, somebody asked Jesus whether or not it was lawful to pay taxes to Caesar. And this is the coin that they pulled out. And they said, you know, respond in this such, rendering or pay to Caesar upon which is Caesar's, right? And basically, what this coin was representing is the annual tax payment that was required to the Roman emperor by its subjects. Now, what's cool about this is the denarius played a really cool role in through history. And I found something quite unique regarding the denarius in my reading of this. So this coin came out about 211 BC, and it was actually the standard for the Roman silver coin. Now, these circulated throughout the Roman Empire, and depending upon where they were minted, there's going to be variation in this. Okay. But its historical relevance was emphasized by the fact that it was very easy to come across this no matter where you were within the region. Didn't matter where you were at. If you were in an area or a region that was under Roman control, then you're going to have found the denarius, right? But it became not only just a major silver coin for the Roman Empire for over 400 years, its significance was that it was related to the Rome long-established bronze coin system. Now, if you look at this particular coin, you're going to see on the left-hand side an X. Now, what did the X stand for? Now, in looking at this, and this is where my first piece of information, if it's slightly incorrect, bear with me. But that was that each one of these in a copper item, each weight of measurement was called an ass or an ass. Okay, that's AS, not ASS. And what the denarius was 10 asses. Now, it kind of made me chuckle. But it's actually 10 units of measurement. Now, when we think about the term denarius, the denarius term actually meant like we do with a $10 bill. Hey, I want to give you a tenner. And that actually is the word. It literally means tenner. And it's based off 10 denarii. And hopefully I said that right. Denarii, whatever that word is. And it's basically 10 of them. So in this particular case, it would be like a dime in that case. It's 10 units of measure. And that's where the term denarius came from. Now, when you look at this particular one, this was the one that's referenced in time of the creation of this, the development of the weights and measure. It's not the actual one that was done during Jesus' time frame. The one that was utilized during Asarius. Yeah, that's the other one. I can't remember what the hell that was called. The other one that was there during Jesus' time is different. And unfortunately, I have the image, but I didn't put it in my slideshow. On the reverse of this, you'll see Caesar, or it's actually Nero, which is a coin during that time frame. And then you'll see somebody on the back, a Roman centurion on the back. I can't tell you what it says because, again, I'm not an ancient person. Anyway, really cool coin. The next one here is the shekel. Now, this is the temple shekel. Now, this was referred to a lot in the Old Testament time frame, specifically when they were talking about the Jewish faith and they were talking about the tabernacle and the temple. When they were talking about the Israelites were required to pay a half a shekel as a census offering. Now, the coin was essentially for the religious observance, but it was the only one the temple would take to meet this particular tithing, this particular donation. So what was this? Well, there were actually two types. There were the shekel and the half shekel. Okay, so when you're looking at, they were given a half shekel. The shekel itself is 14 grams of silver. So when you're looking at weight, you're talking about troy ounces, we're talking just under a half an ounce of silver. So when you're talking about the half shekel being 7 grams, you're talking about just under a quarter ounce of silver. So when we talk about units of measurement, units of weight, this is about what we're looking at. When we look at the price during that time frame, it would equate to about excuse me with my throat and sounding like I've been living in a smoke shop. The the wages for this would have been approximately $50 to $75 US, or 2 days' wages. So if you take this down to a half, and I don't remember the unit of measure that they did with the original one, I think it was a denarii, was different between the Greek and the Roman weights. One was 3.5 grams, the other one was 4.45 grams. But each one of them represented a single day's worth of work. And so when you're talking about this donation that was given, it wasn't it wasn't chump change, right? We're talking about 2 days obligation, which is pretty significant during that time frame. But a lot of people wonder, and this is something that I was looking at when I'm trying to identify this particular element. Why was it only this coin? And what I found, and again, Mike, this is where you're more than welcome to come in and correct me if I'm wrong on this. But what I found in this was the reason that they had this particular coin was because of its near consistent silver content, which came in about 94%. And it was one of the coins that was pretty rock solid across all of the coinage. They did pretty good about making sure that this silver content stayed right about that location. Now it was more more required for that, because what would happen in the within the temple is that the authorities who were responsible for making sure that things like the temple builds and the outreach and all the things that they had to do, and the updating of the religious ceremonies and stuff like that, they had to have a very specific weight of measurement to ensure that they could basically balance their books. And this gave them a very, very, very consistent idea of how much money they had in their coffer, what they could expect each year. And their annual budget was pretty significant. I found a bunch of different numbers, so I'm not sure which one is true, so I'm not going to give you one. But the range came anywhere between $30 and $60 million by today's standard, which was the constant revenue stream. So when you're talking about, the creation of the temples, again, you'll see various stories throughout the Bible where Jesus confronts the Pharisees, talking about, their love of money and stuff like that, and they really were angry at him for doing so. This is one of the reasons. But again, the purity was chosen this coin was chosen because of its purity and their ability to actually excise exactly how much money they could spend throughout that time frame. Now, what's cool about this coin is I have one. Now, my mom actually gave me a temple coin for my birthday this year. I don't have it here. Unfortunately, by the time I decided I was going to do this, I didn't have time to go to the place where I store my valuables and pick it up. But I'll bring this out of there one time and I'll show you guys. This is one of the few coins that I have, but she knows that I love those, and she picked me up a temple coin for my birthday. Let's go through and do this one. This is probably one you guys are very, very, very familiar with. And this one is the lepta, or the lepton, or the lepti. It's also called the pruta. And in common tongue, we know this as the widow's mite. Now, this is often referred to as a widow's mite because of the biblical stories in Mark and Luke, where Jesus observed a poor widow donating 2 small copper coins. Now, these 2 copper coins were these ones here. These were the lepta. But they had different names. Jack says he owns one. Outstanding. What's important here is that when you talk about the size of these are minimal. Like, they're itty bitty. And I'm going to talk about how itty bitty they are. If you've never actually held one or seen one, these things are just tiny. But why did this carry such significant value? It's because this is all this person had. Remember that yesterday, if you were in the stream, I talked a little bit about the myth that you had to be wealthy to collect coins. In today's society, we have so much access to money, physical money, that coin collecting can be done by anybody. You can find stuff on the street. You can, go get change for $1. You can go get change for 20. You can go to the bank and you can buy boxes. The opportunity for us nowadays to go do that didn't necessarily exist back in the day. When people were talking about being poor as dirt, it was quite literally poor as dirt, right? And the reason this particular story carries so much significance and so much weight is because it underscored the significance and the principle of sacrificial giving, giving in the time in which you don't have. Now, those who are of the Christian faith, you hear of tithing and giving the 10%. This was the gift at everything, right? This was the gift of 100%. This was leaving nothing behind. There are other biblical stories where people pretended to give more through it, and they were actually struck down in the temple. But the lepta, excuse me, I apologize for that, folks. The lepta were little itty bitty copper coins. Now, they were both Greek and Roman. Now, this is something I didn't know about. I thought they were always Roman, but actually, they were used in both Greece and Rome. And during the biblical era, they were very, very, very low in value. So, how low in value are we talking about? Well, in order to understand that, we need to understand one. When we talk about Luke and Mark, when we talk about them talking about this, the lepton were items that the Jewish believing families, the people of that realm, would actually understand, right? It's something that they would get. They understood the terminology. However, Mark was talking to non-Jewish readers, right? He was in another area, and they used the word lepton instead of pruta so that they would actually be able to understand the reference. See, pruta was Jewish, lepton was not. And so when you're talking about that, again, you'll see lots of different words, lots of different phrases for the exact same type of coin. For instance, a farthing, right? A farthing was also a unit of measure that was later utilized in Britain, but it's the same unit of measurement. So when you see coins from like this, you have to remember that just because you call it one thing, there may be somebody else calls it something else. And it's just because of their understanding or their view of history or what kind of aspect of history that they were referencing in. This is why a lot of people call the widow's mite, and the widow's mite, we have a general idea of exactly what it is we're talking about. So I referenced this into the size of a farthing. Well, a farthing was later found in the British Kingdom, as I said, but it was a unit so small, its value. Does anybody want to guess? No, Mike is chomping at the bit to probably type something. Does anybody want to guess in relation to a cent, the fraction of cent that was the lepton or the pruta, the widow's mite? Feel free to put something in chat. This is one that when I was actually finding out that that was there, I was like, holy crap, I didn't know that. Make sure that if you're watching on the vertical, you double tap that screen, please. And you haven't already done so, if you feel so led, feel like you subscribe, go ahead, do that. I see no guesses. So this is a quarter of a cent, right? We talk about the United States half cent, but this is actually a quarter of a cent. Now, let's take my stacker, friends. Okay, let's talk about the actual weight of the sterling silver that we're talking about. Yeah, 1.2 grams. This is 1/960th. 1/960th of a pound of sterling. Itty bitty, right? And so something so small carried such a good weight. And this is just one of those things where I just enjoy the story. But I really never quite understood how exactly small they were and how they related to those particular items. The next one is another shekel. This is the Phoenician shekel, but this is different than the other one. Not by much, but they are different. And you might know this particular one by a certain betrayal. Now, One of your best chats, Frosty. Well, unfortunately, nobody's nobody's chatting. No, I know what you mean, bud. Thank you. The Phoenician shekel is also known as the betrayal coin. So this is what historians believe would have been used in those 30 pieces of silver that was given to Judas Iscariot. Now, if you guys know, Judas brought in the Jewish leadership and basically said, hey, he's the one. Here's where he at. They took him into the Garden of Gethsemane. There was a big to do. The guard's ear was cut off. Jesus healed the person, even despite being arrested. There's a great story of this. If you've seen the Passion of the Christ, it became a major pivotal point in the storyline. The betrayer who went off and offed himself out of massive sorrow for what he had done. But the coin itself is pretty significant and represented a vast region of history during this time frame. But this actually came from Phoenicia. So this is the Phoenician settlements, and this was located on the Iberian Peninsula. And what was cool about this, and again, we're talking about the coins that would have been around during Jesus' time frame or referenced in Jesus' time frame. So some of the coins that we show came way before, but their impact continued all the way through. The denarius 211 BC was still around in 80 AD. And so they carried significant weight throughout this different time frame. This one started around 237 BC and was around after the defeat of the Punic War. Now, if I say Carthage, people immediately think of Greece, and you think of conquest and the war with Rome. Major battle in which Rome just totally destroyed Carthage. And you think about the history, a lot of silver down in Carthage, but Iberia was actually only second in resources to Carthage. It's actually one of those really big areas that just was not kind of identified as much. It just wasn't one of those that was looked at with the same level as the ancient Romans did with Carthage. And that's primarily because, again, yesterday we talked about their vocal word, the spoken word, the poetry of the time. These were stories that lived on in history because they were gone through, like they had actually went through this, and this is how we remembered history. Yes, people wrote it down, but we spoke our songs, we spoke the histories, we shared, we sat around, we talked, and it was very, very important. But Iberia just didn't have that same level of recognition that Carthage had. But the Phoenician shekels, were extensively used throughout the territory, and you would see these as part of Lebanon and Syria. So if you think about that Phoenician settlement, this is where we're talking about on the global map. They were also, just like the other ones, the shekels, they were also known for their purity and weight. Now, these were not quite allowed to be utilized in retrospect to the temple coins, but they were still really good for their purity. They still held about that 90, 91, 93, 94% purity. These varied more. They liked the other shekels more, but if this is all you had, you could do this, but these were not recommended. A cool coin, still absolutely fabulous. This is the God in the wheelchair coin. I'm just kidding. This is the drachma. And this is one that was referenced when you talk about the lost coin, the parable of the lost coin. Now, there's some words in here that I'm having a hard time going to announce. So if I pronounce these wrong, please bear with me. Septuagint, which is the rendering of bekwa. So what does that mean? That means it's a half shekel. Now, remember when I talked about the standard weights, okay? This was about 62 grains, or for those of you who are stackers and know the grain measurements, it's about 4 grams of silver. And the drachma only appears one time in biblical quotes, and this happened in New Testament, Luke 15, 8, and 9, where they're talking about the rendering of the piece of silver, the drachma, when they're talking about the parable of the lost coin. Now, in this particular one, what I found was quite interesting. I actually didn't know this, and every time I look at these particular elements, I do some research to find stuff about history, find stuff about story. I learn, and when I learn, I love to share this with you. And this is something I didn't Like, I always understood the concept or the premise of a dowry, but I never understood that in many cases it was the woman's responsibility to manage the funds of the household, to actually keep the bakes, keep the books. The men would make it, take it to the temple to spite it in, but it was actually the woman's responsibility to manage that. And she was responsible to her husband for that. Now, let's not get into that discussion there. Okay. We'll just leave that one alone. But why this was such a big deal is because this was a significant amount of money. Again, when you're talking about the 1 denarii being a day's wage, you're talking about 10 days' wages in a single coin. This would have been a very significant amount of money for this particular household. So for her to have lost one, she's going to put everything she can in finding it. The relevance of the story is marked by not only its presence in facilitating the role of financial stability in Greece, but the understanding of the roles was something. Can I help with something? Drachmas produce drum tech drama. It is produced tech. Oh, beauty. Tetradrum. Okay. Beauty. I appreciate that. See, this is where I'm not an ancient coin historian, so I definitely appreciate you here. Hopefully the other information I've been given is accurate. I worked really, really hard to get as much information, cross-reference stuff, make sure that it was there. So I appreciate the clarification of that, Mike. I really do. But I found this was really important. But this leads me, the value of this leads me to my biggest and kind of realization. And I think many people in the chat right now, there's 20 some odd people between both streams. I think there's a lot of people that are going to have a massive misconception about this piece right here. This is something that I had understood, but I never really understood the significance of what a talent was. A talent isn't a coin, and we know the parable of the talent. This is in Matthew 25:14-30, where the very wealthy representative gave 3 trusting servants their talents and said, it's up to you to deal with these while I'm gone. And 2 of them invested and they did whatever and they made money back. And then the third one, afraid of disappointing the master, went and buried it in the sand. And a lot of people think when they're talking about this, they're talking about this, small coins, which they were giving a handful of coins and then they were responsible for doing that. But the fact is, it couldn't be farther from the truth. I'm going to show you this breakdown. Now, this is, whoops, there you go. This is going to be hard for some of you to see, so I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to provide you with the actual breakdown on this. I'm going to read this to you. I know that you in vertical mode is going to have a little bit hard time reading this, and if you can zoom in, you can zoom in. If not, again, I will provide this in the description down below, and I'll make sure that I add it on my community page immediately following the stream. So if we're talking Greek and Roman had different units of measure. Okay, so we need to understand that a talent was a unit of measure. Now, a unit in measure in Greece was a different from the unit in measure in Rome by a significant amount. Rome, because of its vast wealth, had a higher weight ratio to a talent than you did in Greece. So it's important to understand the tetradrachm, a mean, a drachma, and the weights of this. So I'm going to break these down. So one talent is equivalent to 26.17 kilograms. Kilos, folks, kilos of gold or silver. This is not a small amount of money. It's huge. And when you talk about them given 5 or 10 talents, we're talking about significance, 100 kilograms or more of silver or gold. Massive, massive amounts of money. When we talk about a mine, M-I-N-E. It's 1 talent. Okay, so 60 mine is equal to 1 talent. And a mine is 436 grams. Now, in this time frame, gold and silver had their own weights of measurement. They had their different price ratios, but the weight measurement was still the same. Okay, 100 drachma was 1 mine. 6,000 drachma were 1 talent. 1 drachm was 4.36 grams. 1 tetradrachm was 4 drachma, which is 17.45 grams. 25 tetradrachma is 1 mine. 1,500 tetradrachma is 1 talent. Mike is probably curling in his seat because I'm massacring the names of this. But again, I wanted you guys to understand that we're talking, when they talk about the parable of the talents, we're talking about a massive, massive amount of silver and gold. Stackers, yeah, right? I mean, think about this, okay? We're talking about hundreds of kilograms of gold and silver, and they were given so that they would have to, be responsible for it and invest it. And when the one buried it, take it to a bank to where they at least earned the interest on it, the master was very upset because he entrusted them with large, large, large sums of money. If you were in Rome, a talent was 32.71 kilograms. You'll see again, there's a massive change in the weight ratio between the Greek talent and the Roman talent. It was 100 lira was equal to 1 talent. Now, a libra is a Roman pound. So we're talking about 100 pounds. So again, we talked about the unit measurement here just a little while ago. The 1 libra is exactly 3/4 a Greek mine. So here, this is really cool because it actually gives you the conversion ratios, right? You have the Arius, which is a 1/44 libra, which is 7.44 grams. A solidus, which was 1.72 libra, a drachma, and then a siliqua. And it gives you the breakdown. But what we're talking about here is massive, massive, massive amounts of money in this period of time frame. So when we're talking about a talent, by today's standard, I want you to think about this. If somebody trusted you enough to give you 60 pounds of gold, what would you do with it? The amount of trust, the amount of integrity that had to have been there for this particular person to give those servants that amount of money, the level of trust for the person that is in charge, that purveyor of that wealth, had to be significant. So next time you hear the parable of the talents, understand we're not talking about 5 coins. We're talking about a massive, massive, massive amount of money. So live in Greece and work in Rome. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. But again, it's important to understand kind of where you come from. Now, just like Greece and Rome, it would be like living in Texas versus living in California, right? The cost of living was more expensive in Rome. Therefore, I'm sure that they equate to pretty equitable amounts of money. I do have some references that I want to give you, and I want to share that stuff with you later on. But I wanted to take some time on this Easter Sunday and go over some of the parables and go over some of the items and the things that would have been happening during Jesus' time frame and some of the stuff that he would have been talking about. Because today, again, is Easter Sunday. And, whether or not you believe this, is a massive religious holiday, and, he is risen. So I thank you for the opportunity to bring this stuff to you. I'm going to bring this down, stop sharing my screen, and now we can just open it up to chit chat. I hope you guys like that. I really, folks, I did a lot of research to try and pull that stuff together and do something. I text Paula. I was so happy when I figured out what I was going to do for today. And I was like, I figured it out. I know what I'm doing. I got a lot of work. I got a lot of work to do. But folks, if you tell me that you're interested in something, I will do the same kind of research. I will dig in and try to find this stuff for you. Because
you did a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do YouTube because I like to learn and I like to teach. I like to share the information I learn. I like to provide it to people and break it down into as well as I can. I'm not always very good at it, but break it down in its most usable pieces. And so I hope you guys like that. Mike, I appreciate some of the clarification. Um, the coins and the words and the verbiage and all that stuff is literally Greek to me. You like that? Ba-dum-bum. But it was fun to do that. It was interesting to go through and look at the history and kind of break that down. And I figured that today, it would just be a fun presentation to do on Easter Sunday.
I just like the pictures.
Oh man, I love, and you and I have talked about this a lot when we talk about ancient coins and knowing what's going on.
I
There's a
researched a
lot to
little bit
learn.
when you said what you were doing, but like I looked at one site. It's a good site, but I looked at one site.
I
And I was like,
probably looked at 30 or 40. And the hard part is there's so much information that sounds the same, but people don't agree on the coins. People don't agree on some of the weights of measure. I did find, and I really like the talent piece, because I went back through and looked at a couple different pieces and started doing some math, and I was like, they're really close. Like this is a really good reference. I like this. So I wanted to share that with you. And again, if there are coin experts out there that really understand ancients, if I happen to show one from 20 years earlier, I apologize. It's the best that I could find with the information and the time that I had to do this. So
I have seen that book, Mike. I have seen that book. I don't think I own it, but I have seen that book.
Money of the
Yeah,
Bible.
I looked at here. I'll post it a website, and you can tell me what if it's any good, Mike, because I don't know. But this was the website that I looked at. I mean, like I said, Frostbyte looked at probably 100 websites, and I looked at one because it had pictures. It was I told Frostbyte before we started. I stopped at this website because it had the information I wanted and it was dumbed down. So it was very easy for me to read.
Yeah.
It had pictures, it had, some compositions and it gave the Bible chapters and verses that these coins were referenced in, and that was really all I wanted to know.
75 in pennies. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat. I definitely appreciate it. Great job, Frostbite. Keep up the awesomeness. I appreciate that. I really do appreciate
nice.
that. Otis, was there paper money in those days? Jay actually answered that very, very quickly. And that's correct. There was paper money in China, but there wasn't paper money during this time frame. Paper money didn't exist in this region of the world until much, much later. Actually, I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was well into, I think, like the 1600s or something like that.
Did it have anything to
even
do
longer.
with like the diseases that went around and stuff like that? Or was it just strictly, I mean, because there wasn't,
Well, I think
there wasn't the materials to make paper money, or
what I'm about to say is conjecture, and it's based off of knowing the area. I don't think paper would have fared well in the rainy areas that they were in. I mean, now remember, gold and silver were,
makes sense.
they had other stuff. It wasn't just gold and silver. They had brass, they had bronze.
Well, they had bronze.
Yeah, so they had a whole bunch of different items. There were coins made of stone. There were coins made of wood. And this is, Mike, this is one that I want to get with you and Aaron on, that I think would be absolutely fascinating to know more about. I don't know much about it, but the actual weight systems that merchants would use to actually determine the actual weight of the silver that was being, or the gold that was being turned in. How they did that, how they do that. And that's actually the development that Roman time frame actually goes back before Rome. But the Roman time frame of that weights and measures, a very specific set of weights that was determined to be worth X amount of money. I would love to see how they did that with um, stone and with some of the precious metals and stuff that they did. How they did those weights, how they verified that. It'd be a great conversation. But yeah, back in the
Copper,
day,
silver,
I think a lot of the
bronze, and
metals,
silver.
um, one, especially when you talk about Bronze Age and stuff like that, it would have been, yeah, I think it would be a great conversation, Mike. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Because I was looking through some of the porcelain ones and some of the other stuff from other countries. I was like, this is weird. Like this is a really odd piece of numismatics that I never would have thought about.
They
Like
did
it
a lot
just
of barter and
stumbled
trade in
across.
those days too,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but again, money back in the day was a rich man's game. I mean, quite literally.
Yeah.
You had to
Yeah.
have something to have money. A lot of people would till their fields and have that small little area. You know, some people didn't even have that. They had to work for what it was, and their one mean or whatever it was for their year's wage. Um, it had to last them. There wasn't an opportunity to collect some of these. This was a rich man game. That's why they call numismatics the hobby of kings, because the only people who
Mhm.
could collect the really nice, really elegant, and store those items and not worry about the loss of money were the very wealthy, the elite. And you still have the opportunity nowadays to find some really cool, amazing things just by doing some work, like just digging through pocket change and looking through quarters and nickels and dimes and half dollars. So cool
Most
stuff.
ancient coins were not made for commerce. What were they made for, Mike? Like taxation or services? Um, what were most ancient coins made for, if not for commerce?
um, I would say it had to do with government based, like
Taxation.
transfers of wealth and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, they were owned by the families, but it was a way to store wealth, I think. But you'll have to get the answer from them. That would be my assessment, but I don't know for certain.
Mhm, mhm.
And this is why to pay armies. Yeah, yeah, okay. Pay armies.
Mummies.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Ah, sacked and pillaged. Ooh, pillaged. I like that word.
Yeah.
Pillaged.
I haven't been pillaged lately.
But if so they paid the armies, but then what did the soldiers use the coinage for if not for commerce? What good was the coinage to them? Um, what was it? Am I does that my question make sense? Like if it wasn't used for commerce at the end of the ladder, what was it used for? Because I would think eventually they used what good was it if not for commerce? I don't know if I'm making any sense. I'm
So yeah,
silly.
Jack, without asking, absolutely, counterfeits have been around as long as stamped money's been around. Yeah, Jay's like hookers and beers. Um,
Hookers okay, that makes sense. All right.
well, but the thing is that remember they would carry their weight on them,
Isn't
and
that
when
commerce?
when a military member would get out of service,
Yeah.
they would take and they would be given land, and then they would have to pay
Right.
for servants or
Right.
whatnot, right? And so they would retire and go to whatever. Um, a lot of non-Roman citizens, upon completion
Oh,
of their
not for commerce in
enlistment,
Rome or Greece. Okay, got you. So just wherever
yeah,
else they went. Yeah. I do know that they were given land and such after they were done, or even after a great battle. They were often paid in land and yeah. So I do know that. I watched movies.
one of my favorite movies from that time
Everything I know
frame.
I learned from Netflix.
One of my favorite movies from that time frame
Hmm.
is Maximus Meridius.
Maximus Meridius?
Do you
I
know who
don't think I ever
Maximus
saw that.
Meridius
I thought
is?
you were gonna say like Monty Python's.
Oh. I watched that the other day and
It's
posted.
isn't that in your in your posts, like your
Yeah,
community
and a lot of people got that right. Yeah.
tabs? The
No, the
Inquisition.
Maximus Meridius is in The Gladiator. And that is
Oh
one of
gosh,
my
yeah.
favorite movies from that era. It's so well done. Um, Absolutely amazing piece. I really do enjoy that movie. The
Hmm.
cinematography that was done in that movie and the little shuttle nuances was cool. That was a great movie. Um, but again, they talked about the coin purses and when he was
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about, retiring and going back home and planting his field and doing that stuff, he reached down and
Right.
grabbed his coin satchel and was like, I want to get back to my family. Um, so he was saving his money, right? Like it was that kind of that feeling. Um, but yeah, cool stuff. And
No, this
if I'm not,
I talk about ancient coins and how like I don't have any interest. It's not I really do. I mean, I'm a coin person, so I really do have interest in it. It's just very
yeah, exactly.
intimidating and I think that like we get questions every once in a while in our email about ancient coins and it's there's a lot of when you go to research an ancient coin, just by like the photographs people send us, it's very difficult, and it's not my favorite. It's right up there with searching VAMs. It's
Yeah.
it's there's a lot, and I think it just yeah, I just got kind of, like, soured, um, just because
Well,
there's and I didn't have a lot of resources. That's another thing, like, having the resources out there available.
I listened to Aaron. Good morning, Easy. How you doing? I
Well, this
listened
was
to Aaron.
before I found Aaron and Mike. This
Yeah,
was
and I
before I
I
found
go
those guys.
the
Yeah.
amount of information that they have, it
Mhm.
boggles my mind. Now
Oh,
I
yeah.
understand, it's repetitive motion. You do it more, you learn
Very
it.
entertaining,
It's
right.
it's establishing a muscle, right? You get that muscle memory, just like you with
Yeah.
numismatics and looking at varieties and errors. You're pretty able to look at things and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
identify what they are. You have to verify and validate, but you're pretty good at knowing exactly what's going on during that time.
Yeah.
But where I get like, holy cow, is the sheer amount of counterfeits. You're thinking about a coin that's been around for, 22, 2300 years, 2500 years. How many different types of counterfeits as time has gone on? There's way more counterfeit ancient coins than there are ancient
So I have
coins.
a question about that too that maybe you can answer. So maybe Mike can answer or Jack. When it comes to counterfeits on ancients, do they typically counterfeit the more expensive ones, the more valuable ones,
It's
or do they counterfeit just any?
just like
And
anything.
what
There's
would you
widow's mites that are counterfeit.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they just counterfeit
Well,
everything.
that sucks.
Well, it goes back to what's the
That sucks.
premise of doing that? There's actors who do
Coin
it for the reason solely to disrupt the world because they just don't care.
yeah,
They want to make money.
yeah.
But in many cases, it was to disrupt that global power. When I went to Europe, one of the things I was fascinated by going to the Royal Mint there at the Twin Towers Castle and going over the Tower Bridge and all that stuff and checking stuff out, looking at
Yeah.
the Tower Mint and going through that stuff and seeing Thomas Jefferson and some of the people that were there, that what they did and how they worked through that, and looking at how they identified and how they protected against counterfeits and what was the purpose for that, right? And there are so many adaptations to coins over the years to prevent counterfeiting
Wow,
that it
Jack.
would be amazing to get with somebody who really understood ancients, who really
Mhm.
understood the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance. Get people who understood early American colonism. You get people to understand modern day coinage and walk from the beginning all the way through the development and the changes in the coins and the ridges and the reeds and all the various things that happen because it's so amazing to think about the history and the lineage of coins in the development because of counterfeiting. All the changes that had to be made. And remember, folks, that during these time frames, it was treason. It wasn't a light offense to counterfeit. They would cut your hands off, cut your head off. Like this was bad news.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was treasonous to deface.
Morocco.
If you put an X on a coin, that was defacing the face of the emperor. It was treasonous. So the punishments that went with that were severe. But where there's a money, where there's a will, there's a way. And people found ways to skim the edges of the coins and do that kind of stuff and take off the what do they call that when they skirt the edge of the coin? Not finning. It's when they would cut off very, 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 very small. They would shave the coin. I think that's just called shaving.
Yeah, it's
They
just
would
yeah,
shave
they
the
just
coin,
yeah, they would
right?
just they were different techniques in doing it. They
Yeah.
just would remove they yeah.
So they would shave the coin around, and then they would, it didn't matter
One of the
because a
reasons
little
we
bit
have
would add
reading
up a
on
lot over time.
reading and edge
Clipping. There
on
you go, Jeff Davis. Thank you. Clipping and shaving coins.
perhaps, yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, there's so many cool things regarding uh what happens in ancient coins and the modern adaptations. And I say modern, going back to 17th, 18th century, um, compared to ancients, right? Some of the adaptations that were done and why reeds were actually put on coins.
Right, reading and
So
edge lettering and yeah.
yeah, all that stuff, right? Why do they do that? And it was all anti-counterfeiting. So
Yeah.
to be able, yeah, chiseling too. There were so many
Well,
different
and not
advents and changes.
anti-counterfeiting as much as to keep people from shaving the silver.
Yeah.
'Cause they
Speaking of
did
clipping,
use
I need a haircut and a shave.
But, actually, when they minted, if you go to the Carson City Mint, if you take their tour, they'll talk about this, how the women in the quality control because women were all it was all women in quality control back in those days, as it should be, just kidding.
Morning,
Anyway,
Cartier.
they actually did shave part if a dollar came out a little bit too heavy, they would actually shave part
Oh,
of that.
and if it was too light, they would punch it and plug it with additional silver content to get it up to weight.
Well, that wasn't a typical thing with Morgan dollars and
No,
such.
not with
That was an
Morgans, but
earlier, yeah, maybe an earlier practice, but um
yeah.
yeah, so it's really interesting because you can actually find them that still have the marks. And I can't remember what they call that when they holder them. I think there's a term that they call it when they holder them for coins that you can find that have been shaved or Mike, you know what I'm talking about, right? I'll have
Spa
to
coins.
No, I'll have to find an example.
You got a good
Uh,
shaving before it went into the holder.
or I could just be making stuff up, I do that
No,
sometimes.
no. No,
I don't know.
Cartier chop marks are totally different. Chop marks were done
Yeah, it's not chop
um,
marks. Yeah, that's
to actually validate that the content was silver and that somebody wasn't trying to pull a fast one over.
yes, the Chinese did that
Adjustment
with the
marks.
trade dollars. Mike, I actually did some research after yesterday. Of course I did. When you were talking about grading and grading chop marks and such. I actually went and did some research.
Oh, surprise,
Yeah, and maybe
surprise.
adjustment marks. Maybe adjustment marks, Jack. Yeah. So you've seen that before. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I actually had to go do some research into why um why they're not always given straight grades and which I agree with, and why some top marks are okay, but like if it completely defaces the coin, like I had to dig a little deeper into that.
Dig a
Because
little deeper in the well,
I
boys.
did. I can't, like, it bothered me. I'm like, that was a
Well,
really good question. I need to look into that.
but this is what makes you a great numismatist, right? When you were challenged with a thought, you
Yeah.
go dig in and you find the answers. And this is what makes you as knowledgeable as you are about these things. Um,
Early dollars.
you
Okay.
and I have talked about this a lot, right? We get something on our mind, um, a 2 cent piece, for example, and something on our mind, and it should just dig and 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 look into it and find out exactly what's going on and
Yeah.
check for items. And then we come back and talk about it and go, hey, there's no example of this. Period. End
Yeah.
of story. Right. But that's what makes a good numismatist is being willing to, yeah, hit those rabbit holes. Exactly.
I actually really, really like researching stuff,
Yeah.
and
We're going to
I
nickname Paula
really, really
Alice.
do. I do like to research stuff. Um, okay, Jack Riley said on bus dollars, mostly on early dollars. I know I had seen it. I couldn't remember where I had seen it, but I do remember that I had seen that. Um, yeah,
Frosty, there are plenty of dig sites in Italy and Greece on a weekly basis where people
nice,
pull
Mike.
kegs or storage full of ancient coins from some dig sites. I don't doubt that. Um, I do, I do know, and this is Mike said this earlier. You know, you'll find ancient coins all over the world because of the exploits of the military, right? And so
Hmm.
you'll find people that they've been they were killed in battle and they buried themselves over the coins. And as people went through and they picked stuff off of the dead soldiers, because you always picked up shoes or sandals and you picked up swords and you picked up money and you picked up rings or
Yeah,
anything like
yeah,
that that you could find, because they would all go to either making more weapons or securing wealth. These were the pillaging of the rights.
mhm.
A lot of that stuff was hidden, so it was buried in mud and blood, and
So
so
when
you can find that stuff
archaeologists
all over.
unearth these, you know, I don't know if they call them caches, what they call them, you know, big big things of coins or whatever. When they
Caches,
unearth that stuff,
hoards, finds.
caches or
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know
there's
what they
tons
call
of
it,
different
but
names.
do they keep that stuff or do they have to turn that over? They give it to the whoever funded the dig, or I mean, how does that work? Like,
Mike
I mean,
might have to
I'm
correct
sure
me,
a couple of them are pocketed.
but it depends on the country of origin. So
Okay.
I know, like with Greece, it's illegal to own any Greek coins unless you have some sort of like lineage and documentation and stuff like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike,
Really?
but it really depends on the country of origin as to
Hmm.
what your ability to own that coin is. A great example, modern, is like the what is it? Yeah,
Government or funding.
what
Okay.
is the
It
oh,
belongs to
come
the host
on, for
country.
heaven's
Okay.
sakes, the little island off of Puerto Rico, right? The quarters,
Gilligan's Island?
right? Um, well, you got to be careful selling Cuban coins, right?
Mm,
Or certain coinage, because there's laws against selling some of those.
mhm.
Greek coins, if you don't have the what is Mike, what is the I have one for a piece of a carving that I got from a Chinese gentleman when I lived in a house. He gave me a gift. It was a carved tiger, but I had to have the papers that went with it, which tracked the lineage and when it came across. I can't. What's the name of that? I can't for the life of me. I can't remember. Um, I can't remember the name of that element. But you have to have that in order to say that you're okay. Otherwise,
Hmm,
they can claim those. But it's very country specific.
okay. That makes sense.
Let
That
me
makes
let me see if I can find
Are you talking about China, like the Chinese money? Like, or who was it, Mike? Was it, is it Leanne that does the Japanese money or Chinese money, Japanese money. I think it's the Japanese money. I was gonna try to get her on our show. She works with you, right? Like, any
Yeah,
countries?
Ivory has, yeah, this is Ivory, so I have to have
Liana. Yes, Liana.
Liana. Okay.
She's a sweet gal, yeah. They had her on a while ago on their Coin Show podcast, and she did a presentation on that stuff, and it was so interesting. I know I do need to get a hold of her and get her on the show. I really do. Provenance, yeah, it says
Provenance. There you
provenance.
go. Thanks, Ant. That's the word I was looking for. You have to have the provenance. And that provenance of
Where's
things is
her?
often
Oh,
counterfeit as well.
okay.
Yeah.
She's an
Thank you,
entrepreneur.
Ant. That's the word I was looking for. I was like, I know what it is. I just can't remember. You have to see when it came over and when it's done. Yeah,
Morning, Robert
1970. Yeah.
Bruce.
You have to make sure that it was in the US during that time frame. But just because it's there,
Oh,
you can have countries can still claim ownership of it, even if you have provenance. So it's very country specific. And
mm,
there are some countries, from my understanding, again, my understanding, I'm not totally secure in this statement, but from my understanding, they'll put pressure on the government to make it difficult for you to keep it if they really want something, especially if it has vast historical significance.
really?
So,
Hmm.
Mike, you have to verify that with me because I can't remember. There was one, and I want to say it was either Greece or Egypt within the last couple of years, where they challenged somebody, and it was it them? Oh no, it was Scotland, and it was a cane. There was a Scottish cane that they came back, and it was a family, and they're like, "No, we want it."
A
And
cane, like a cane, like a
like a
walking
cane, it
cane?
belonged to a one of the purveyors of the original family name. Was thousands of years old. Um,
Wow.
Sea Gold Edamar.
Wasn't
Um,
there like a hoard of
yeah,
gold or something coins found in a piano a while ago, like a few years back?
yeah. There's
Why do I that ended up they ended up tracing it back to finding the original owner of the piano or the family of the piano, and they ended up giving it to the museum. Am I making this up? Did I dream this? Like, I remember something about that. There was an old piano that was sold, and they found a bunch of, like, gold coins or something like that inside the piano, and they were able to find the family. I don't know. Maybe I'm making it up. I don't think so, though. It seems like I remember reading an article in like Coin Week or Coin World like 6, 7 years ago. It was a long time ago. It did happen. Yeah, gold sovereigns. Thank you. I thought maybe I dreamt it. Am I the only one that knows about this? Yeah, and I think that the family ended up donating it to a museum or something.
the piano or the gold.
I I wanna say it was both. Maybe not though. I don't know.
Could you imagine donating a piano and
Maybe
then
a
all of a sudden
maybe
finding out there's $1 billion worth of gold in the damn thing?
yeah, I think
That'd be unreal.
I think I'm gonna look for that story because, um, I wanna read it again. I can't because I can't remember if it was a piano that was bought at auction or something like that, and then they ended up finding it, and yeah, I can't remember, but yeah, it's a really, really interesting story. If you guys can find that story, read it. It was a really interesting. Okay, the piano was donated to Bishop's Castles Community College in Shropshire. See, Red Silver knows. T explains why it was so heavy. Huh? T the silver stacker. Yeah, I remember seeing something about that or reading about it years ago. but it was a really interesting story.
I love gold.
Gold.
Well,
900 gold sovereigns. Thank you. I'm glad you guys are finding it too, because I thought I know I'm not
well, you've
completely
lost your
insane.
mind, but maybe not on this
I
topic.
know. No, that's what happens with me. Like I'll read something and then a little tiny bit of it sticks in there,
Yeah.
just enough to where I'm like, I remember a story about that.
Yeah. It's like, holy smokes, this piano's heavy. What the hell?
Can't remember
900,
my
900
kid's
gold
birthday.
sovereigns. Think about that. The gold sovereign today, $3,000. You're talking
Yeah.
about that's a massive amount of money.
Yeah, it was
Crazy,
really
crazy.
something.
That's crazy.
Anyway,
Well,
all I
cool.
ever find in old stuff is like old, Tic Tacs or mints or something. All right, well, I'm gonna get going because, but you know what? This was really an interesting thing. I mean, you know how I feel about ancient coins, but this was a really, the Bible is my jam.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but thank you for doing that. Happy Resurrection Day, everybody. Be kind, love on your family. Remember what this day is about, and eat some candy. All right. Thanks, Frostbite. Talk
see
to
you
you
later,
guys
Paula.
later.
Have a great day.
Bye.
All right, folks. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I enjoyed putting that together. Mike, thank you so much for being in the chat. Both the Jacks, thank you guys so much for all of your support. I enjoyed doing this. Again, the one piece, if I was to take anything from this, was it is 420. There's a lot of people celebrating this for another reason. Um, was the talents and understanding when you read that story, um, just really begin to understand the vast amount of wealth that was entrusted to them. Again, we're not talking about single coins, we're talking about a vast quantity of wealth. And so, if you guys learned anything, I hope that was something that you picked up on. I thought that was a lot of fun to do. And if you guys have questions, if you guys have topics that you really want to know, if you guys really want something researched, you really want to find out something, I can't promise you I'll give you everything that is there, and I can't 100% guarantee it'll be without issue, but I will do everything I can to do the research and present something to you. And if I can't, what I will do is I will reach out to some of the people that I know in the stream and make sure that we connect those people. I really got to find time once the coin show's over and things settle down for Mike and Aaron to get them on. I have a couple of ideas that would be extremely fun to have them come up and chat about it. So I will work on that. I also need to follow up with Blue Ridge and get him to talk about some grading tips. A lot of people have been asking me about grading. I'm the wrong person to ask about that. I can grade stuff up to about 62 and then I'm done. So we need people who are adept at that and who really understand that. So if you have something, you have an idea, frostbitecoins@gmail.com. I've made it easy for you guys. So make sure you send me an email and request topics. It may not happen immediately, but it will happen. All right, folks, I love you guys. Again, 75 in pennies. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat. I definitely appreciate that. Thank you guys for your love and support. Be well, be blessed. He is risen. Happy Easter. I will see you guys in the streams. Take care.